So welcome back to the Tool Shed. This tool I call Why Not? It comes from my teacher and mentor, like so many of my tools, Dr. Viktor Frankl, author of Man's Search for Meaning and 39 other books, father of logotherapy. I'm a logotherapist. That's meaning-centered psychotherapy, but more than psychotherapy. It's meaning-centered living. And that takes us into this tool. Dr. Frankl happened to be a psychiatrist and a neurologist. Most people don't know that. And prior to his Holocaust experience, being incarcerated and having his world torn apart, he was a psychiatrist for people, particularly who were suicidal. So really working with an extreme segment of our population, people who had suicidal ideation. And then he went through the Holocaust, and many people, of course, chose to kill themselves. And as he always talked about, it was a viable option. You couldn't judge somebody for opting out of life because that was not life. He had every justifiable reason to have killed himself, and yet he didn't. And that's all context for a very serious tool, if you will, that he used with every client thereafter. When a client would come to him, a patient in his case, would come to him, he would always start out by asking them one question. Now, this question is not an easy question. This question will get you canceled in this day and age. I mean, really, I think a lot of people are going to be shocked by it. It's the foundation, by the way, of Module 3 or Chapter 3 in the book Man Uprising. And it is this. Dr. Frankl, I'm not going to try and do a European accent, would say, why haven't you killed yourself? Why haven't you committed suicide? I think is technically how he said it, same thing. So why haven't you killed yourself? Now, at first, that just sounds so jarring, right? Imagine you come to me, I do Man Uprising coaching, you come in my doors, sit down and say, so, Joe, why haven't you killed yourself? And there's a reason for it. There's a profound reason for it. It actually isn't so shocking when you think about it's really the only thing I know about you if you come through my doors or Dr. Frankl's clients. Why haven't you killed yourself? It presupposes that you haven't killed yourself. That's the only thing I can know for sure about you. Thus far in life, you haven't killed yourself. It doesn't mean you haven't had suicidal ideation. It doesn't mean you're in a good place. It just means by the fact that you walk through the door, you haven't killed yourself. It's quite brilliant when you think about it. And so I do use this in my coaching, my counseling practice, gently. Maybe it's not quite maybe it's not the first question I ask them, and maybe it's not quite as, explicit as that. But think about this for a second. A person who is asked, why haven't you killed yourself? Right now, I'm asking you, why haven't you killed yourself? This isn't suggestive. This isn't, playing games, right? This is a serious question. And I ask it to myself and I ask it to the people I love and guide, having come from a world where my father killed himself, my grandmother killed herself. So again, I don't take it lightly, but answer the question for a second. Maybe it was because I have children and I would never do that to them. There have been low points in my life. I wrote about it again, so I'm pretty free with it. Actually, I write about this in part 2 of my book, that I came to the brink of suicide when I was in Israel, when I was at my lowest point, coming up on 10 years ago. I didn't know which way to go. I didn't know professionally and personally and financially how I was going to make a go of it. And there was a moment when, $3 million life insurance policy sounded like a way out for my family. And one of the things that I promised myself after my father killed himself was that never again would my family continue this process of suicide as our, inheritance. I would not be a third generation of suicide. And one of the things I came up with during that very dark time in my life was, I can't do this to my children. And that was a starting point for me. I can't do this to my wife. And I start to build on top of that. And you start to find all of the things in your life that are not only worth living for, but they need to be lived for, right? That they're yours and yours alone. And if you can't, if you don't fulfill it, it won't get fulfilled. So it can be something profound, like I won't kill myself because of my children or my wife, or maybe it's, something as seemingly trivial as I committed to a friend that I would attend his graduation from college, or maybe it's my dog that I'm living for. I work with people who sometimes they've lost everything. They've lost their wife, or their wife has divorced them, or they've lost their financial inheritance. I've worked with people after the Madoff scandal who literally lost everything. And they were not in a place in life to rebuild. They were in their, I think, 80s at the time. And we had to really drill down into, why haven't you killed yourself? And believe me, they were considering it. It was an elegant out for them. But we ground down into their core values, into their grandchildren. What kind of a message would that send? What kind of legacy would that leave behind? So this is a profound way to really rebuild your life from the ground up. And you don't have to wait till you're in a desperate, dark place in order to go through this exercise. In fact, I'd encourage you to do it when you're in a good place, to really take stock of the nuts and bolts of your life, of the fundamentals. This is such an important process because when you do that, you realize there are things that are not things, that can never be, things can be taken away. What you ground down into in this process can never be taken away. Maybe it's, I won't do this because I know I'm being watched on the other side, right? So if I have nothing physically around me, and I don't know anybody who doesn't have anything or anyone, but assuming you didn't, maybe it's just I believe I'm being watched. Maybe it's I believe in God and I believe there's a reckoning. Maybe it's I owe it to those who came before me and gave their lifeblood for me to be here, not to exit that way. Maybe it's because I don't want to have to go through this again. If you believe that, there's consequences for our choices. Watch, by the way, the movie What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams. It's an amazing movie about why you should never make that choice. This really isn't a conversation about suicide. This isn't a conversation about desperation. Certainly it can be a starting point, but it's about the foundation, the bedrock of our lives, and it's about what we live for. That's the takeaway for me. Because once you start doing this process and you just literally start making lists of all the reasons why, not only will I not kill myself, but why I choose life, the list gets real long, real fast. And we got to come back to that list over and over again throughout our lives. We got to keep adding to it. We got to keep refining it and checking back in. That's the stuff of life. So it's not about why haven't you killed yourself. It's a conversation about why do you continue to choose life, and must you continue to choose life, and you will always choose life if you have this why not list. Sometimes it's just easier to start with why not versus what's your why. We'll get there. That's the work that I do with people in my life, with my Man Uprising, my up coaching work, is to help men in particular, people in general, find their why, live their why. But sometimes it just starts not with why, but with why not. It works for us as individuals. It can work for us as a family. Why don't we, a marriage, why don't we get divorced? Why not? It can work for an organization, right? Why do we not just fold up and go out of business? I'm talking with a friend who's doing this with a peer group, and they're at sort of an existential crossroads. I've met with many different types of groups and organizations that come to this crossroads. Sometimes, right, it just comes down to not what's our why, but what's our why not, and building from the ground up in those core values, those core takeaways that you come up with that are yours and yours alone, as an individual, as a couple, as a family, as an organization, as a group. And that's what it means to discover and live your why not. I will see you in the next video. Until then, rise up in the second half of life.